everyone. Thank you for joining and welcome to the new era of testing. I'm Dan Belcher. I'm one of the founders here at mabl. I lead our product engineering and support efforts. I've been working pretty much on the same problem my entire career, which is how do we deliver tools to help software teams be successful. I find that to be a very rewarding goal because I love the idea of helping people. And that's also why I became an entrepreneur. I love building teams of people and seeing them do great things. And this event today is one of those great things.
And I'm Jeff Cooney. I'm an engineering manager here at mabl. I've been with mabl since shortly after it was founded, as part of the initial engineering team. One of the things I really love about mabl and working at mabl and just software development in general is the opportunity to work on a wide variety of problems. I love, whether it's across the software stack or, the various life cycles of the software development process and all of that.
Great. And maybe just a quick aside before we dive in, this is the final presentation of the day. After this, we'll have trivia. And I find that it's very often that I end up in the slot right before the fun. So thank you for hanging in there with us. Before mabl, we were at Google, and my last presentation at Google was on the second day of a conference where all the other presentations went long, and I was competing against the happy hour. And so you can imagine what the turnout was at that session. Thankfully, we're here on time to talk about our vision for this new era of intelligent testing. If you joined the keynote this morning, I'll recap our vision. Starts with making test automation accessible across the entire team so that we can embed quality across the entire SDLC. That will enable teams around the world to extend the test coverage that they can provide across their entire customer experience. And that may involve web applications, that may involve PDFs, emails, and more, as we've talked about today. And then finally, our goal with mabl is to create a platform that allows you to improve your practice and your results continuously. And so that's the vision for mabl. I think it's important for you to note as a customer that mabl is a very powerful and sophisticated system behind the scenes. There are really 5 components that are important to understand as we talk about our innovation and roadmap for 2021. The first is the mabl trainer. This is the tool that you use to author and edit tests. The second is the low-code mabl framework. That's an intent-driven framework that you use to express your tests. The third is the runner. That's a unified runner that can execute tests, whether it's on your local machine or in your continuous integration environment or in the cloud. Next, there's the data and analytics pipeline. That's a cloud-powered pipeline that can collect, process, and make useful millions upon millions of measurements. And then finally, there's the web application, which you use to organize your tests, manage your team, and perhaps most importantly, understand your test results. And so we'll talk over the next few minutes about how we're evolving each of these components.
So I want to take 1 minute to just talk about this idea of making automation accessible and routine. Back when we first started mabl, there were a number of articles that had come out that were advocating for increased use of integration and unit testing and a reduction in end-to-end testing. And when we looked at those, what it was really about wasn't that they didn't see value in end-to-end testing. It was about ease of creation, ease of maintenance, and shortening the feedback cycle. And for us, it really actually highlighted what we thought was the opportunity that was there. So thinking about making testing accessible and routine, for us, that really starts with the training experience. I think you've heard other people talk earlier today about our new desktop app, which is the next evolution of our test creation trainer. And with that, the key for us there, really the strategic key, is that it breaks us out of the browser. And that enables a number of things. Specifically, it gives us a common single platform where we can now look at test creation beyond just browser-based tests. So you'll see API tests in there, as well as future types of tests and additional types of tests in the future. It also kind of opens up the possibility, by getting us out of the Chrome extension world, to have a common runner between our local CLI runner, the test creation, the test trainer, and as well as the backend increasingly. But once you have this training experience, the record and playback tools aren't a new thing. But what's different in this current generation is this idea of bringing in machine intelligence into it to make them much more maintainable and much more viable for complex use cases. And the way we kind of think about this, it's a little bit different than you often see in the industry, where we're often looking at human test creation in one corner and machine intelligence powered or AI powered test creation in another corner. So we actually believe there's a lot of power in pairing those two things and coming out with solutions that actually take the best of machine intelligence and pair that with human feedback and human expertise to come up with a better test creation, better test maintenance process. I think the repeated element stuff you've also seen earlier is an example of this. Something where mabl analyzes the DOM to detect when you have scenarios where you have tables or grids that might be tricky to maintain, then prompts the user to give that context. And if you kind of picture this pattern moving forward, I think you'll see a lot more there. So imagine things like as you're creating your test, mabl automatically detects things you might want to assert on, or automatically detects if there's a form on your page and offers to auto-generate the steps to fill out that form with integrated with fake data and everything. And so now you have this framework that you can sort of easily create and maintain end-to-end tests with. But what you really need now is the ability to cover all of your complex use cases, and that's where a lot of these more mature, flexible features come in, such as data tables, conditionals, JavaScript, and third-party integrations like math.js and faker.js. The way we sort of think about this is mabl's a low-code solution, not a no-code solution. So you can do a lot of stuff with no code, but then when you need that power, it's there under the cover. It's there as well for you. So kind of taking a slightly more forward-looking on this, I think what we'll continue to do is pair this concept of ease of use and continue to drive and make it easier and easier to create and maintain tests, as well as adding additional power and flexibility. So what that looks like is, the GA launch for the Trainer desktop app is really the main focus for us in the short term. From there, we start looking into how we can further streamline test editing, taking advantage of that new UX. And then start thinking about offline save and edit. So, and this is really about enabling things like exporting a test and importing it into a new workspace, or potentially saving it alongside your code, or sharing it with people offline, and being able to run it without having to have the full mabl system up when you're traveling and don't have a great internet connection. And then from there, also thinking a lot about how we can make the platform even more extensible. Basically, there's no such thing as a simple web app, and and often everyone's app is just a little bit different. This, thinking about ways we can make it even more extensible, even more tailored, so you can tailor it even more to your own application is part of the vision for where we're going here as well.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. This morning, we also talked about how we can bring quality now across the entire customer experience by making test automation easy throughout that customer experience. Since the beginning of mabl, we've viewed end-to-end testing as a vital part of a team's workflow, and that end-to-end to us means truly end-to-end, whether that journey begins for a customer in an email or on a web page, whether it involves API connectivity, PDFs, and basically any place where customers go to consume your software. Today we announced mabl end-to-end API testing, which is building on the API steps that we had offered previously as a way for you to build low-code API tests and run them alongside your UI tests using the same trainer, the same runner, the same UI, the same analytics engine, and as you do for the UI tests. And so this is a solution that is fully integrated from the start, not bolted on to the side. And that new trainer desktop app is a key part of this. When we look ahead, of course, moving that API testing feature from early access to general availability is the current focus for the team. We get a lot of feedback from you, our customers, about other places where you'd like to see us go. Responsive web is certainly one of them. Microsoft Edge is another. That's a task made much more palatable now that there's a limited version of Edge available for Linux. But now that automated testing is becoming more routine and accessible, we're achieving what we had set out to do to begin with, which was to unlock that human capital to focus on higher value aspects of quality, right? And so now that the automation is fairly straightforward, you're pushing us to offer more visual testing and other ways for you to validate the quality of the user experience. And so this is an area where you can influence our priorities just as you do others by providing us with feedback and responding to our NPS surveys and the like. A lot of this, again, comes back to the fact that we have one trainer, one runner, and it makes it a lot easier for us to move very quickly to add new test targets.
So thinking about embedding quality deeper into your workflows, to me, what this is really about is being able to shorten the feedback cycle. Essentially, the sooner we can identify quality issues with any code changes or anything we're about to push out, the earlier in the software development process, the easier it is and the less expensive it is to address them. So really, what you're thinking about, you're starting from the place of I've got good test coverage now. It's running regularly against my main deployed environments. How do I go from there to start running on as I push code out on every deploy? And that's where you start thinking about the mabl integrations to various CI/CD systems. From there, you start thinking, how do I get these tests running on every build? I know you saw Joe talk. Some of you may have saw Joe talk earlier about how we're doing that at mabl. That starts involving the CI runner, starts involving things like branching, and then how do I use the command line interface to start running my tests locally before people are even pushing changes to my application. And as we sort of start thinking, it's very tempting with low code tests because they can be pretty easy to create a simple test to think about as something you just kind of create and let go. But I think we really need to apply and think of creating low code tests as a discipline and apply the same engineering rigor we do to our code changes via code reviews and the like to low code tests. And I think what this looks like, starting to think about test reviews. Think about things like, is a test using shared components? Are we doing too much in it? Does it have the right assertions? And mabl provides a couple tools to do this now. Specifically, you can, using our CLI tool, you can export a test as YAML, complete with steps and descriptions. And that can be something you can kind of review for the logical flow to see if people are checking out the right things. I know some customers are actually doing screenshots of the mabl of mabl as well, and including those things in reviews. And I think what you'll see over the course of 2021 is for us to make test reviews very much more a native part of the app, and to have increasingly better support for this in mabl itself. And as you're thinking about running locally, as a developer, I know if you give me something that takes 45 minutes to run a full suite of tests, I'm not going to run it locally. The speed and the feedback time is absolutely critical here. So one of the things to think about there is how can I make this a really simple one-liner? And the way we're doing some of that at mabl, I think if you heard earlier, is we apply labels to our tests that target them towards specific features. And then if I'm a developer working on a feature, I can quickly get feedback just on the test related to that feature, and then lead the CI pipeline to do the full run and the full validation. So thinking forward a little bit here, what are the improvements in mabl we'll see in terms of embedding quality deeper in your workflow? I think you'll see the CI runner, the continuous integration runner. We're pushing towards GA for that. You'll see us finalize that unification of runners Dan was talking about, where we've got the exact same engine running for the desktop app, as well as the CLI, as well as our cloud execution. And then, like I mentioned, peer review integration. And then finally, as you start thinking about really pushing deeper into the development workflow and creating tests at the same time as you're making code changes, what you really start looking for is even more advanced branching features, the ability to check tests in as source, things like that allow you to really deeply integrate those changes with the code changes that you're making at the same time.
Thank you, Jeff. And the fourth critical theme for 2021 is to support your continuous improvement, right? And by that, I mean the continuous improvement of your testing and of the quality of your application. When we thought about, how do we enable this, the interesting thing is that mabl itself is a microcosm of the virtuous improvement cycle that we're looking to enable in your teams, right? And so it starts with you adding coverage, testing coverage, and it proceeds to mabl will run those tests, and then mabl will collect a tremendous amount of data, and then mabl uses that data to optimize its work so that the tests run more effectively next time, right? And so what we're looking to do is to give you opportunities to use that data to improve your work. And it's already possible to a certain extent today. The first thing is making sure that we have complete data. And so this year we launched a new feature called failure categorization. And this gives you the ability to very quickly label your test failures with a reason, right? It could be this run failed due to an environment issue or a network issue. And just recently, we added the ability to do that in bulk. Now, this is useful information within the mabl UI, but its power really unlocks when you export your test results to a system like Google Sheets or Excel or even Google BigQuery. Right? And from there, you can generate really useful insights. So for example, during a given time frame, I may want to see why did most of my tests fail. So here I can see that 34% of my tests failed due to environment issues. You can use that same data set as you're looking to prioritize your time maintaining your regression suite, for example, to look at which of my tests fail the most often, right? So that you can prioritize your test maintenance. Or you could identify that the tests that fail most often fail for a good reason, right? It could be that this is an error-prone area of my code base or application. You can also look at speed in this data. So especially in a continuous integration or continuous deployment world, the total time of your test run is very important, right? Because as Jeff said, we need that to be as short as possible to keep the pipeline flowing. And so this gives you the ability to look for, what are my slowest tests? What are the tests that are causing each run to take the longest? And again, you can prioritize your focus to optimize the speed of those tests. Another good example is asking the question, do I have the right test coverage? Right? Meaning, are there parts of my application that are important that have inadequate coverage? And this year we launched an integration with Segment that allows us to ingest page visit data from your application and then correlate that with data that we have about your application model and the tests that you've created. And so here I can see, for example, that for my sign up page, which has 46 users in the past few hours, I have 2 tests, but no assertions, right? And so this may cause me to say I should, improve my test coverage over that page. And as we look through the rest of 2020 and into 2021, we're very intrigued first and foremost about how we can improve test coverage from an API perspective by using information that we learn when we execute web UI tests. Another area that you might have guessed we would invest in is delivering some of these insights that we just showed you that you could develop by analyzing the data on your own, exporting and analyzing it. We're looking to bring some of that insight directly into our application. That those insights could be delivered through other data sources, right? Segment was the first, but Many of you use other data sources like Google Analytics. And then finally, annotations. So when you're classifying your failures, we have a set of failure reasons, and we've gotten the feedback that people would like to define their own failure reasons and, in fact, annotate tests and results in many different ways. And so I hope that gives you a sense of where we're focused and executing against that vision in 2021 across the key components of the mabl system. There are definitely ways that you can stay in sync as we move forward. The first, as Jeff alluded to, even if you're not normally one who works in a command line, I'd really encourage you to give the mabl CLI a try. It's a very straightforward tool to use, and that there's a lot of functionality that's available via the CLI that's not available from the mabl UI, including today access to our headless local runner that can execute tests very, very quickly. Peer review of tests, there's a great blog post that Bertold from our team, I think it was Bertold, published just recently about how you can apply those concepts that Jeff talked about around code review to test reviews. Data exports available today. If you happen to use BigQuery, that's a native integration that we support. You can also download your test results as a CSV from the test results page today. So you can go ahead and do that analysis on your own. Perhaps most importantly, we're really excited for you to participate in the process of setting priorities and road mapping over the course of 2021. We have feedback.mabl.com, which is a great place to log your requests and upvote them. Our quarterly customer survey is the most important input that we get on priorities. And then we have the Friends of Mabl Slack community. And if you're not a member of that, please just reach out in the in-app chat and we'll get you an invite. And then finally, the early access program for the desktop app, the CI runner, and end-to-end testing is up and running. And so if you're interested in trying those features out and giving us feedback, you can do so now. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jeff. A reminder to everybody in attendance to go ahead and, if you haven't already, make sure you submit your questions in the live Q&A section of your window, and we'll try to get to them in the time we have remaining. We do have a couple of questions lined up already, guys. I think one of them you may have already answered, but let me just throw it out to you again. You mentioned a lot of great features over the course of the presentation. How does the audience give you input and feedback on items you're thinking about or items that they would like to see considered?
Great question, John. Yeah, I think the best starting point is feedback.mabl.com, where that's where people log requests and comment on those requests. And so that's a great place, asynchronously to add context. And the good thing there is you can get your peers to sort of share in that discussion. We don't have a lot of sort of product feedback discussions happening in Slack in the Friends of Mabl community so far, but we'd be very, excited to participate in that. And then if you are a Mabl customer and you want to talk about roadmap directly, we're here to support you. So just feel free to reach out to your account manager, customer success manager, and we can get that set up.
Great stuff. Lots of good channels there. Next question here. You mentioned in the presentation incorporating test reviews into development. What does this actually entail?
Jeff, you want to take that one?
Yeah. Okay. I think there's multiple ways you can handle it, right? I think at a minimum, what you're thinking about is just how do I look at my tests and make sure that they're doing the things they're supposed to do and they're doing it well. Tamara and Andrew had a great presentation earlier about getting the most out of your tests and making the most effective tests. And I think this is a way for you to leverage the people who have the most seniority on your team and the most understanding of what makes an efficient Mabl test and allow them to contribute and basically be a force multiplier by giving feedback to others who are maybe newer to the system or don't know some of the best practices. If you get to the point where you're actually writing tests, creating tests alongside your code, you could think about things like in the PR reviews, talking about the test or putting a screenshot of the test in there or an export. And that's a great way to kind of not, if you want to gate merging code on having the right test coverage, that's a great way to kind of think about doing that if you're working tightly enough with your engineering team to do that.
Got it. Thanks, Jeff. Next question. I feel like this is a juicy question to dig into. Several times, I love this question. Several times you mentioned the idea of engineers getting involved more in testing. How do you suggest we approach conversations with our engineering team or teams to help drive that?
Oh, that is a great question. Well, I think first of all, it starts with buy-in across the team, and so I think as with many initiatives, we need the full support of the team and management and buy-in that it's the right thing to do, right? Which is easier said than done in some cases. The second is, as we've talked about, making testing accessible today. Right? I think sometimes engineers, developers, they like the idea of crafting their own tests in code. And they like that until they go and ship that code, and now somebody has to maintain those tests, or we need to have a regression suite. And so I think a core part of this message is sort of help us help you, right? And if we can all speak the same language, then that means that just because you created the test as a developer doesn't mean that you have to be responsible for it forever, right? Meaning what I want you to do is, in a lightweight way, create a test that shows me the core use case for this feature that you're building, and then we'll go and extend that and evolve that over time to the extent that you have a QA function as well. So that's one part of it. I think the other part is frankly, when I talked about becoming familiar with the command line interface and the CI runner, I think it's important to help developers understand that we've removed a lot of the friction for them, right? They can work from the command line. A lot of them don't love to log into the web application every time they want to update a test or the like. And so they can trigger most of the journeys that they need to trigger from the command line. And then that they can run their tests in an unobtrusive way, to use something like Jest to have the test running headlessly in the background. There's a lot more content on this, and we've developed a number of pieces around shift left testing, and so I'd encourage you to take a look at that.